What is up? It is Maximus MMA coming at you with my predictions for UFC Fight Night. Belal Muhammad versus Gabriel Bonfim. Um, First time ever with the face cam, so as promised, I've been trying to, up the content a little bit. I've been MIA, but great things are coming. Sort of a test run, so I'm still getting the audio right and things of that nature, but I will hop straight into it. Getting down at the Apex in the main event, we have Belal Muhammad against Gabriel Bonfim. Belal Muhammad, former champion, right? Another crossroads fight. You see this all the time in the UFC, where you have a guy who's on the up and up. The UFC wants to push him against a guy who's been there, done that, right? And Belal Muhammad's the real deal. Former champion, obviously. Beat Leon Edwards for the strap about 2 years ago. But then he got pieced up by JDM pretty bad, and then Ian Machado Gary, put him through an Ian Machado Gary type decision, a loss, which was impressive. But Belal, he's a gamer, right? He's not going anywhere. He's tough, but he just doesn't have that natural physicality of fast twitch or real danger, right? He's there to drag you into deep waters, as we have all heard, and get you out in that manner. Meanwhile, we have Gabriel Bonfim on the other side, who, since losing to Nicholas Dalby via KO 2.5 years ago, has been on a nice streak against Angelusa, kind of a bum, a jobber. Chaos Williams, clearly not really fit top 15 level, but, a guy in the UFC. And then beat Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in a close decision. I remember that fight. And then I was impressed the way that he beat Randy Brown. Completely different stylistic matchup from Randy Brown here, but I see the majority of the community is picking Muhammad, obviously kind of by a smudge decision here. Even though that Belal is the Chicago man, I am going to go with Bonfim here. I just think that the danger that Bonfim presents, I think, is going to have him live to finish Belal. Belal, again, he's not going to quit on himself, but he's taken some damage, right, in these last couple fights, and eventually that chin will crack. I'm going to take Bonfim here by KO, likely in the first, I would say, 2 to 3 rounds. Up next, we're going to have Brennan Allen against Edmund Shabazian in the co-main event. Interesting fight here. Brennan Allen is going to come in as the favorite, especially after he did what he did to Rainier de Ritter as a huge underdog, came in and pretty much beat the piss out of him, right? I mean, he just, after losing that first round, he regrouped on the stool and continued to dominate and really just break Rainier de Ritter's mental. Before that, it beat Marvin Vittori, and, it only lost to guys like Imavov and Hernandez, who are the elite of the elite. Taking on Edmund Shabazian, who's on a nice little streak here, beat Andre Muniz, who, let's be real, is not UFC level in any world, right? He never was, so I don't really rate that victory very highly. And Andre Petrosky, again, and he just lost to Cody Brundage, right? So that tells you all you need to know there. Before that, beat Dylan Budka, who's also not in UFC. So Shabazian's kind of been making a career here on beating guys that are not UFC level, and that loss to Mearshart 2 years ago is concerning, especially when you think about just the willingness and ability to grapple for Brennan Allen. I am going to have to go with Brennan Allen here, probably to win by a sub, or a decision. It's really going to be if Brennan Allen can get him down and keep him down, which I fully expect he will be able to do. But Brennan Allen's one of those guys, man, where he's hard to really know what he's going to do because you don't know what version of him is going to show up. And I did pick Brennan Allen to beat Rainier de Ritter in that main event relatively confidently because Brennan Allen's one of those guys you just don't know, right? Sometimes he'll be like, man, he could be a former champion. Other time he'll go out there and he seems content to lose a decision, right? Kind of that's exactly what happened against Imavov and Hernandez, so I'm spot on with that. I do like Brennan Allen to get this fight done, though. And, probably work towards a real title eliminator. He's close. He's been around a long time. He's 30 years old in his fighting prime. Shabazian a similar age, but just a difference in level of competition. I have a hard time picking against Brennan Allen here. However, very hard man to trust. Tread at your own risk. Up next, we're going to have Fares Ziam against Tom Nolan. Ziam has been absolutely on fire, right? I mean, beat Jai Herbert, Claudio Puelles, Matt Favola, nasty knee to a head. Turn around! Out cold. That coach, man, I'm sure he's still sick to this day. And then since that, I mean, beat Mike Davis, who Mike Davis in that fight just didn't look like himself. He was coming off a long layoff, and Faraz Ziam kind of just dominated him. He was in one weird position, though, if I remember correctly, where it was a little odd, but Faraz Ziam, so flexible, he got out of it. And he beat Nazim Sadikov, who had a little bit of hype on him, but finished him by KO pretty violently. So taking on Tom Nolan, who's also on a decent streak, but, he's beating guys like Victor Martinez, Alex Reyes, Borshev, right, Charlie Campbell. These wins aren't as impressive, and I just like the finishing ability of Ziam in this matchup. I really think that he can get the win by KO, or he could coast to a decision. I do think that 90% of the community is a little surprising, but Faraz Ziam has proven time and time again, at least recently, that he is the real deal. So I'm going to roll with him to win this fight. I could definitely see a finish because Nolan is kind of chaotic by nature. So I think that, there will be some nice clinch exchanges, and that's where Faraz Ziam is dangerous. Not just because of this Matt Frevola vicious knee to the head, but he's very long and lanky for the weight class. Now, it says Tom Nolan is a similar size, so we'll see how that goes, but I really like that clinch work for Faraz Ziam, and I think that we could very well see him fighting for a spot in the top 15 before the end of the year. Up next, we've got a cool one here with Bryce, the boys, Thug Nasty Mitchell against Santiago Luna. Full transparency here, I'm going to be a bit biased, man. I'm going to roll with Bryce Mitchell. Santiago Luna, he's a great athlete, right? And he's got a lot of finishing potential here, which is the worry. But he's only 21 years old, right? He's got his whole career ahead of him, and the experience gap here is vast. I mean, Bryce Mitchell has been there, done that with mixed level of success, but I just think that Bryce Mitchell is one of those guys where he's going to teeter around the top 15 of the weight class. Now, this is a move to bantamweight. I believe his last fight was at lightweight, but I could be mistaken. He might have actually fought Saeed Nurmagomedov, which was a great win at bantamweight. Call me a casual, whatever, but that Gene Silva, everybody knew he was a lamb to the slaughter. Unfortunately, even though I was really hoping Bryce was going to pull it off, but yeah, I don't know. It's really, can Bryce Mitchell hold him down and employ his grappling? Because on the feet, he's going to be completely outmatched here. The fast twitch muscle difference is going to be very apparent, I think, in the first exchange. So if you're Bryce Mitchell, really, be very cautious. I think that first half of the round, and then look to end the round with a takedown, make it kind of a toss-up round, and then proceed to drain the gas tank of Luna as the fight goes on. I'm going to take Bryce Mitchell here. Like I say, I'm a bit biased, but, who doesn't want Bryce Mitchell to win, right? Come on. We need a post-fight speech. Especially before the White House card. Cinema man. Up next, honestly, a good matchup. And I think this is a good idea from the UFC. You've got a guy like Io Berenuski who has come into the UFC off that Contender Series fight where, he's dropped, and he drops Muhammad Ali, right? Timu Muhammad Ali. Anyways, and then after that, KO'd Ibo Aslan in a great fight. And then, which again, he was getting dropped, right? Great fight. Very exciting. And then Austin Lane, but who doesn't KO Austin Lane, right? So, Junior Tough on the other end is just such a bum, man. I mean, he gets heel hooked by Walter Walker, but in hindsight, not a terrible loss. Walter Walker, his heel hooks are the best in the world. I mean, and nobody would have told you that before he started that streak, but so I don't really blame him for that. One trick pony, Junior Tafa can't wrestle. Look at his race and his last name. He can't wrestle, right? It's just the truth. I'm sorry. Don't hate the messenger, man. All right, I'm just telling the truth. And then gets submitted by Tuco Tocos. Billy Elicana, who's a solid fighter, beat him again. Just if you can get him on the ground, Tafa is an infant, right? I mean, he's there to be finished. And then he beat Kevin Christian, who was an absolute bomb. Good for Tafa for getting a win in the UFC. It's been a while, but Kevin Christian sucks, man. I mean, I watched his Contender Series fight against, I don't even know who he was fighting again, another random, but just uninspiring. No real danger on the feet. Not really good on the ground either. And just a guy who's not UFC level. Taking on Berenuski, who's running through people, albeit low-level competition. This is going to be an interesting one because of Io Berenuski, I know that he can wrestle. I saw some fights on the regional scene. Obviously, he is very young in his career at only 8-0, but he does have that in the bag. So you're just wondering, is Berenuski thinking, okay, we've got a dangerous striker in Junior Tafa. let's get him to the ground and just finish his fight via ground and pound? Or is he just going to say, you know what, let's keep up this streak of where I just go into the fire and try to land a big right hand, and he'll probably land it. So I'm picking Baranowski by KO for sure, but Baranowski's got a lot of hype. Not a lot has been proven, but one thing that is proven about him is he is an absolute dog. He will go through the fire, and he is not afraid to take one to give one, right? And I respect that about a fighter. This is either going to be a quick, Baranowski takes him down, finishes him, or it's going to be a war on the feet. I'm hoping for the latter. Either way, I do think Baranowski will get it done by KO, and I'm sure the community is going to overwhelmingly agree. Obviously, we do have a sprinkle on submission, but that's simply due to Tafa and who he is, rather than Baranowski's grappling, which, again, at the UFC level, has been totally unproven, but against Junior Tafa, he's not UFC level on the ground, right? So that should be a good one, though. Then we've got Matt Schnell against Alessandro Costa, who really, I don't know how Matt Schnell is still in the UFC. I mean, he beat Jimmy Flick, and that was like, it looked like you were watching two like frat guys outside of the bar, after 20 Miller Lights, just banging it out over some sports ball game, right? It was just a bad fight, and we knew that Matt Schnell had nothing left. I mean, he just doesn't look like the legs are there anymore. So, I mean, he's just kind of a victim. Like, I mean, that's just how I see it. He's like a victim out there, and I'm not trying to hate on him too much. I mean, he's been around a long time, right? He's 36 years old. But, I mean, lost to Joseph Morales, which isn't a terrible loss. Joseph Morales obviously got cut from the UFC, came back on The Ultimate Fighter, where they had basically a lot of more proven guys, I guess, better way to put it. And, so I don't hate that loss, but Matt Schnell just doesn't look good, man. And Alessandro Costa here is a huge favorite. I mean, he beat Stuart Nickel not too long ago. Stuart Nickel has proven not to be that good. Had a lot of hype coming in, but this is not that guy. See, this is what I like about this matchup. Obviously, you don't want to read too much into it because this is 3 years ago. But I'm going to take the guy that's actually going to go out there and finish Jimmy Flick rather than, roll around on the ground with him and, make it look difficult, right? I'm going Alessandro Costa, probably by KO. Everybody knows it's coming. If he lands clean, Schnell is going out. I like the fact that he's a shorter guy here because there's no way that Matt Schnell is going to ironically present enough danger on the outside to keep him at range. I think once Alessandro Costa gets in his grill, he's knocking him out, man. I mean, the wind might knock out Matt Schnell at this age. I mean, he's tough, but, your chin doesn't care about how tough you are, right, once it's gone. I mean, we've seen that throughout UFC history, so give me Alessandro Costa by knockout. Then we've got Marcus McGee. Really good fighter. He was on a great streak against, some kind of low-level UFC competition. Gaston Bolaños. Jonathan Martinez is decent, but then he lost to Piotr Jan. That was almost a year ago. Wow, time flies, but that's a huge step up in competition. I mean, Piotr Jan, the current bantamweight champion, right? You can't really fault him too much for that after he just beat Merab. So John Giannis coming in, again, just a super big step up in competition, man. I mean, you beat Jaime Siraj, and you lose to Austin Bashi by, getting laid on top of, right? Eventually got submitted, but Bashi, total side note, honestly, he's not been too impressive to me, especially after he got exposed by C-Rod, but got a lot of potential. Stay on topic here, though. I mean, obviously he was turning up the regional scene, but who doesn't that's in the UFC, right? So I'm going to take Marcus McGee. I think this might be a little wide, but Marcus McGee, he's a proven man, and he's very tough, and he's probably going to finish John Giannis. It's just hard to think that he's going to fall off after the Peter Yan fight. I think that's, at the very least, I think he's going to learn from it. I think it's going to make him a better fighter at the end of the day. He's getting a little older, though, so that is literally the only cause for concern I think of in this matchup, but, he's still got some in the tank. Then we've got Bruno Silva taking on Edgar Chairez. This is a good fight, good matchup here. Bruno Silva, I love this nickname for him because it's very fitting. He's the bulldog, right? He's going to come forward. He's always going to make it a fun fight. I mean, when has Bruno Silva been in a boring fight in the last 2 years? Beat Cody Durden. I remember that was like a beef matchup. They used to train together. And Cody Durden was actually looking really good in that matchup. He was kind of putting it on Silva. And then I believe, uppercut. I can see that in my head. I was in Chicago watching that. And he's caught him with a nasty uppercut, finished him on the ground. Great comeback win. After that, lost him to El Cap, who, right, is one of the elite of the elite. Joshua Van, right? Joshua Van, the champion, just KO'd Tyra. So Right? These are elite level losses. And then he beat Huntington's Park, and he lost to Charles Johnson in a close fight. He honestly could have won that, and I'm a huge CJ fan. Taking on Chairez, who, since also losing to Joshua Van in a competitive decision here, has gotten a few wins against guys that, are lower level in the UFC. I really want to pick Silva here, even though this is a very tough one to call. I just think that Silva's due. I think that he's better than his record suggests, especially in the last couple of years. And I really like a guy who's going to go forward. Edgar Chairez in the past has been content to just kind of, stay on the outside and not really make things happen. Bruno Silva is going to make something happen. You can guarantee that. For his sake, we're just going to hope that he is on the hammer side instead of the nail side, which I think he can play that role well against a guy like Chairez, who is perfectly okay with at times just backing up and, throwing out a kick or, popping jabs out there. Bruno Silva's going to get in his face. Now, whether or not there's a finish in this fight, I think it's largely going to depend on how the first round and a half goes. I think that if we get close to a finish and then they don't end up, closing the deal, I think we're likely coasting to a decision. But I do think a finish is live in the early stages. Apparently, the community doesn't agree, but, and I get it. I mean, these guys, right, they're 126 pounds. We're at flyweight, so chasing a finish can be risky, but I think Bruno Silva's going to get this done. I think he's better than his record suggests. Up next, we've got Chelsea Chandler against Priscilla Cachoeira. Chelsea Chandler, really just not that good. Hasn't fought too much. I mean, lost to Jocelyn Edwards, who's been in a great streak. Actually, my favorite female fighter. Fun fact there. Taking on Cachoeira. Look, it's women's MMA, man. Anything can happen. It's tough to call, man. Like, seriously, like, don't take my word too much on this one. It's women's MMA, but I'm going to go with Priscilla Cachoeira because she just looks more like somebody who, if you saw her at the grocery store, you would think that she would probably kick some ass, right? Like, terrible reasoning, but that's why I'm going with her. None of these girls are doing anything in the bantamweight division, let's be real. Don't need to waste too much time on it. Up next, we've got Joanderson Brito taking on Jordan Levitt. I said it backwards this time, but coincidentally, Brito is higher ranked, so I guess the wheels were just turning at a higher level. Look, Joanderson Brito had a lot of hype on him 2 years ago, okay, especially after he KO'd Jack Shore. Before that, he had finished Jonathan Pierce, where he was on a nice finish streak in the UFC. Then he ran into William Gomes, who is a very tough matchup for anybody in the featherweight division because, he's kind of got that Frenchman, same way Cyril Gane, pause. But anyways, don't get me started. But yeah, so, he's a tough style to deal with. He's very on the outside, right, very technical, hard to reach. And I think that gives a guy like Brito a really tough time because if you're a guy that's used to finding the finish, when, a round goes by, another 5 minutes goes by and you haven't found that finish, I really think that starts to wear on a guy's mental, also on his physicality. The pop just isn't there to get him out of there. So I don't fault him too much for that loss. And then Pat Sabatini has turned into, the American Khabib of the featherweight division, right? So Jordan Levitt is not that. And then most recently he did bounce back with a win over Isaac Thomas, who is a bit of a jobber, right? Nobody knows who that is, really. Jordan Levitt, though, obviously he had that loss to Paddy Pimblett, where Pimblett was emoting on him and, all this other jazz. So that was a while ago, though. And then he beat Victor Martinez, lost to Chase Hooper, but that hasn't aged well because Chase Hooper is an absolute bum. But again, a tall guy, right? A different matchup than this. And since then, he's beat Kurt Hollabaugh and Yadier Del Valle, who, I believe he was making his UFC debut, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, though. I'm going to take Brito here, just because I think that Brito just had two tough matchups, and I think that he can find a finish against the Monkey King, who, again, he doesn't have real consequence, and it's going to be a big power advantage here. If Levitt can get to the back or, start to get some cage work going and drain on the battery of Brito, I could see him squeaking out a decision win, potentially a rear naked choke if Brito messes up that much. But you would like to think that Brito learned a lot right over the course of these two tough fights here. And, hopefully he can get back to his finishing ways because, we can always use guys that are looking for a finish. And I'm really hoping that that's what happens. Community is picking Brito largely by KO, but again, it's tough to tell because if Levitt can employ any sort of grappling, I think that KO ability could quickly, start to leak away and just, when you're watching a UFC fight, right, and you're like, this is going to decision, I feel like it could happen that way, but we're not going to know until it starts, at least from my perspective. So give me Joanderson Brito by KO, though. I do think he will get back to his finishing ways. Up next, we've got Hailey Chavez. To be quite honest, I don't know who the heck this woman is. Apparently, she was on the Contender Series and she was beating up people in Brazil prior, taking on Eunice Dubin, who just is not that good, right? I mean, Dubin, she did have that, I don't want to say iconic, that's not the right word, but an amazing KO against Shannon Clark on the Contender Series. She was like Clark was like a -1,000 favorite, and Dubin comes in and did boom. It was nasty. It was nasty. But Shannon Clark has absolutely no head movement, and really, she was just such a big favorite because she was, the more Americanized woman. I believe that she is Canadian, right? But they're gonna push the Western fighters over some random Venezuelan girl who nobody knows. I mean, it's just the truth. It says she lives in the United States, right? And then she lost to Carly Judice. It's just one of those things where you're gonna assume that the bookmakers know what they're doing. And can Dubin find lightning in a bottle twice? Probably not, especially against somebody who Chavez, who, again, in full transparency, I've never seen her fight, but from what I've heard, she's no Shannon Clark. Like she's actually gonna move her head a little bit, and we'll see. She might forget how to fight when she gets in there. It's women's MMA, right? You're always rolling the dice. You never really know, but I'm going to take Chavez to get this done because I just don't believe that Dubin's going to find lightning in the bottle twice. I think it's really just that simple. And then finally, last fight, which will be kicking off the card. Honestly, I think this should be higher than the other fight, but maybe it's because they want us to watch Ketlin Souza, because Ketlin Souza is actually a solid fighter. I mean, she's got some wins in the UFC, and she lost to Angela Hill in a close decision, and then Piera Rodriguez, right? So 2 split decision losses against girls who are, fringe top 15 at this stage of their career when she lost to them. There's not a ton of shame in it. And then she beat Bruna Brazil, who it really isn't that good. But Ketlin Souza is like a little tank, right, for this division. I mean, she's only 5'3". She actually is going to be a little taller here, supposedly, according to Topology. But I like her style, man. Ketlin Souza, I mean, she looks metal as fuck, bro. Sorry, goddamn, I shouldn't have swore. But, she looks very metal, man. Like, she's metal. Like, like, if you're at, like, the bar, right, and your girl's like, hey, like, this other girl's, like, being mean to me, and you're like, oh, let me see her, like, like, if she points out Ketlin Souza, I'm gonna be like, baby, like, what are you doing, because I don't want to see her boyfriend, right? Now, she probably likes women. Now I'm just getting way too deep, but you know what I'm saying? Like, you probably thinking that her boyfriend's, like, some dude who looks like Kyle Brauho or some shit. That's at least how I see it. Now, on the other side, Ariana Carnelosi here, yeah, this is the girl who she was getting absolutely pummeled by Piera Rodriguez, and then Piera Rodriguez goes full ape and decides to headbutt her while she's in dominant position, laying down ground and pound. Literally, like, one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Honestly, I would say, like, of that era, like 2 years ago, that moment, and then where Andre Lima got bit by that guy in his UFC debut. Those were the weirdest moments that whole year that come to the top of mind, and I will never forget that. So you're taking a girl who's really never had success in the UFC at all. I mean, outside of beating girls, 5 years ago, right? Which, again, I guess it is UFC success, but, 5 years, that's a long time, right? Especially when you're a woman at 33. It's just one of those things where I can't put a lot of stock into that, especially after she was getting dominated in these fights, right? So, Lupe Godinez, good fighter, I guess.